Coming up on Network Africa. Germany returns 22 Benin bronzes to Nigeria. Gambian MPs call for prosecution of Indian producer of suspicious syrups. And truce in Ethiopia's Tigray brings human aid relief for survivors. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Millicent Walker in Lagos. Bilateral relations between Nigeria and Germany received a boost with the repatriation of 22 Benin bronzes to Nigeria from Germany. In a ceremony in Abuja at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the German Foreign Affairs Minister Annalena Baerbock restated Germany's commitment to righting the wrong of taking and keeping the Benin bronzes over the years, a sentiment re-echoed by Nigeria's Minister for Information, who used the opportunity to urge the British Museum to return 900 Benin bronzes in its custody. The event, which was held in 3 sessions, gave the Nigerian and German Ministers of Foreign Affairs the avenue to discuss issues of mutual benefit to both countries and address front-burner issues on Nigeria's war against insecurity. Our correspondent, Kayla Megwa, has more.
The repatriation of 22 Benin bronzes to Nigeria by the German government is a mission many years in the making, culminating in the ceremonies planned here at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Abuja. To kick off the day's events, the German delegation at this roundtable discussion is led by the country's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Annalena Baerbock, and she restates Germany's commitment to strengthen bilateral relations with Nigeria.
We really applaud your engagement for the security of the people. This is for us, especially as the European peace order is under check by the brutal Russian war.
Both ministers go into a closed-door session, after which they hold a press conference. Topical issues are brought up for discussion, like the Reuters report alleging that the Nigerian military is carrying out systematic abortions on women in Borno State. Mr. Onyema gives an update on the investigations.
There was a UK NGO in that part of Nigeria that is engaged in those activities, and so we have to look into just a full ratification, so that when this report comes about Nigerian military, just to look at the whole situation comprehensively. And
the Minister of Foreign Affairs for Germany gives her views on the issue.
Rape has been used as an instrument of weapon. That the question, if a woman decides to have an abortion, especially after rape, is a crucial question, and for me, this is a question also as a human right.
The 22 repatriated bronzes arrive at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 10 boxes, relics of an injustice ignored for centuries. There are 1,130 Benin bronzes in public museums in Germany. The ownership of those artifacts have been reverted to Nigeria, and through Germany's Lighthouse project, their return is being coordinated.
Comes back to where she belongs.
As the official handover ceremony begins, Nigeria's Minister for Information and Culture, Mr. Lai Mohammed, calls on other governments and museums to follow the example set by the German government and return the artifacts in their custody, particularly the British Museum.
We call on the British Museum to release the more than 900 Benin bronzes in its hold. A year has rolled by since Nigeria submitted an official letter to the British Museum demanding the return of Nigerian antiquities in this museum. Yet there has been no reply of any kind.
For the German Minister of Foreign Affairs, this repatriation is to right a wrong that has lasted for hundreds of years.
We are here to right a wrong. Officials from my country once bought the bronzes knowing that they had been robbed and stolen. After that, we ignored that Nigeria's plea to return them for a very long time. It was wrong to take them, but it was also wrong to keep them.
Today's event is a culmination of years of negotiations between the Nigerian and the German governments. It has been re-emphasized over and over again at today's event the importance of artifacts to any nation in the world. This repatriation is the German government keeping its word, and the Nigerian Minister of Foreign Affairs, as well as Nigeria's Minister of Information and Culture, says these repatriated artifacts will be properly taken care of by the Nigerian government. Kayla Megwa, Channels Television News.
Meanwhile, the German Minister of State for Culture and the Media, Claudia Roth, has described colonialism as a big crime against humanity, noting that the act of plundering artifacts amounts to stripping a nation of its cultural identity. She was speaking at a reception held for the German minister and her entourage after visiting the project site for the Edo Museum of West African Art, Emowa, in Benin City. Their host, Governor Obaseki, says the return of the looted Benin artifacts will open a new chapter in the Nigerian tourism sector.
Colonialism was and is a terrible crime. In the kingdom of Benin 125 years ago, just as in the Ukraine today. Plundering and destroying cultural sites is a crime against humanity, a crime against that which should actually connect us, the human point in which everything is related to one another. I am pleased that with the bronze's return to the Federal Republic of Nigeria today, we have chosen a new and a different path, a path of shared humanity and custodianship for our cultural riches. And today is not the end of a friendship or a story. No, today is a wonderful starting point, a beginning of a common future.
To many in the West, this return of the Benin bronzes ends an era, because you are returning these works back to those who created the works. But that's not the object. It actually begins a new era of a new relationship. Because with the returns of the work to Nigeria and Edo states, the story now begins a new chapter. And the questions to ask will be, how will these objects benefit the people of Edo and Nigeria? What research and education projects can come out of these returned artifacts? Would it mark the beginning of us trying to understand what these objects actually meant and mean to us? Or do we continue to rely on interpretations from outside of here?
Well, let's bring in Barnaby Phillips, who is an author of Loot Britain and the Bronzes, and also former BBC Nigeria correspondent. He joins me virtually from London. Hi, Barnaby. This is good news for Nigeria, but can you tell us a little bit about the Benin Bronzes, how they ended up in Germany in the first place?
Yes, sure. Thank you. The Benin Bronzes are the cultural heritage of the Edo people, the Benin Kingdom, which was sacked and pillaged by the British military in 1897. The British overran the Benin Kingdom at that time. They sent the Oba into exile, and they incorporated the Edo lands into the protectorate of southern Nigeria, which eventually became Nigeria itself in 1914. The bronzes were taken back to London by the sailors and soldiers of the Benin expedition. Some were given to the British Museum and other museums in Britain, but many were put on auction here in London in the weeks and months after those troops returned. And in fact, it was German museum curators, who often reacted with great alacrity, who realized that these were objects of extraordinary artistic value, who bought them up in the auction rooms of London. And that explains why today you still have such amazing collections of Benin bronzes in places like Berlin, Hamburg, Stuttgart, Dresden, and so on, second only in size, in fact, to the collections in Britain themselves. I should say as well that during that process of the Benin bronzes being looted, of course, to the Edo people, they were objects of spiritual, religious value. In Europe, in a sense, their meaning changed because they came under a very different, sort of a cold aesthetic eye, if you see what I mean. And in that sense, they became objects of art in the European evaluation, and they were put in museums and put behind glass cases, vitrines, and appreciated in a way perhaps that their original creators had never intended.
And with that, of course, there were profits that were made. Is there an angle to the repatriation of the profits from, bronzes that were taken over 100 years ago?
Well, certainly there are people who've made a lot of money out of Benin bronzes. I mean, that their value has steadily appreciated on the private market. For example, in the course of researching my book, I met a woman who sold Benin bronze recently for £10 million, which is an extraordinary price. So yes, people have made money. I think that is a moral argument that undoubtedly the Nigerian authorities will try and put forward, that there comes not only a responsibility for Western museums to return objects, but to help, say, in the construction of new museums, to help in the training of curators, and so on and so forth. Those conversations are ongoing, but I think it's fair to say that the Nigerian focus at the moment is on restitution and the return of the objects themselves. And in that regard, you'd have to say that they've been very successful over the past year.
And, seeing this gesture from Germany, do you think it's a wider attempt for countries like Germany, of course, to reckon with their colonial past?
I think it's fair to say that there's certainly quite a different debate in Europe about the colonial past over the past 5, perhaps even 3 years. You will recall, of course, the Black Lives Matter protests in the United States in the summer of 2020. And if in the United States they were particularly focused on police racism and on the legacy of slavery, issues which are more particular to the United States. Here in Europe, they took a different form, and they tended to focus on the legacy of empire. And then suddenly, you had objects like the Benin bronzes, which, if you like, were coming in the line of fire. Because if you start talking about the legacy of empire, well, objects which were looted during the colonial time were obviously going to leap to the forefront of the debate. And somehow I think the Benin bronzes themselves became almost emblematic of this debate. And that is because they are so splendid, because they are really in almost every major Western museum, never mind Britain or Germany, but if you travel anywhere in the Western world, say from Seattle in the West all the way to Stockholm in the East, you'll find Benin bronzes these days in major museums. And so for those reasons, and also because 1897 is really not that long ago, it's towards the end of what the Europeans call the scramble for Africa, and the manner in which the British looted Benin City is very well documented, indeed very well photographed, as I was able to show in my book. And so it stands out, I suppose, as a particularly egregious, if you like, shocking example of colonial looting.
Now, what are your expectations now that it's back with us in Nigeria? This is also seeing as the Nigerian government is calling on others, countries like, Britain, to also follow suit in returning the stolen bronzes.
Yes, that's right. And some museums in Britain are doing that. In fact, you reported on channels the other week on the Horniman Museum here in London deciding to return its 70-odd Benin bronzes. Other British institutions are following. Of course, what Minister Lai Mohammed was directing his remarks at is the biggest institution of all. That is the British Museum with a capital B and a capital M, the National Museum here in London, which has more than 900 100 Benin bronzes. And I think in the particular case of the British Museum, I think the Nigerians are going to stay frustrated, unfortunately for them. The British Museum is constrained by law from permanently returning objects in its collection. Now, in the past, there's no doubt that British Museum curators and directors and trustees have hidden behind the law. It's been an excuse for inactivity. But at the moment, the law is a reality, and so it would take a vote here in Parliament to change that law. Now, there are plenty of people in Parliament who would like that law to change, but they are not a majority at the moment. So with the British Parliament in its current configuration, with a Conservative majority, it's difficult to see any radical change coming from the British Museum. That might change, say, after a general election, which could be in the next 2 years.
We'll continue to watch what happens. We appreciate your time. Thanks a lot, Barnaby Phillips, author of Loot Britain and the Bronzes. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Still to come on the programme. Congolese city Goma faces food insecurity as fighting cuts supply routes. I'll give you details in a moment. Welcome back. A Gambian parliamentary committee has recommended prosecution of the Indian manufacturer of cough syrups after at least 70 children died of acute kidney failure in the country. The commission was established on October 26 to investigate the causes of the deaths, while the World Health Organization issued an alert advising regulators to stop the sale of the syrups. The commission stated in a report that government should take legal actions against Maiden Pharmaceuticals for exporting contaminated drugs. It further recommends blacklisting all Maiden pharmaceutical products and banning all its products from the Gambian market. The Gambia recalled several drugs in October after the deaths of the children. However, Maiden Pharmaceuticals has denied the allegations. To South Africa, where the President Cyril Ramaphosa has been re-elected as the African National Congress president for a second term at the party's 55th National Conference against main rival, former Minister of Health, Dr. Zweli Mkhize. The country's economy has been struggling even before the COVID-19 pandemic, and the governing party's new leadership has a challenging journey ahead of the country's high unemployment rate, ongoing power outages and corruption amongst the key areas they need to focus on, especially with national elections coming up in 2024. Our South African correspondent Brian Fugeni has more.
President Ramaphosa's re-election as the leader of the ruling African National Congress comes at a time when the country faces poor delivery of basic services that led to its worst election results in history. He once again outlined some of the economic challenges which lay ahead and need to be tackled.
If the ANC is divided, it will never be able to build an economy that can create jobs. We need, yes, to act with resolve, to ensure that we address the turmoil, for instance, of load shedding that is taking our economy backwards. We also need to remove the obstacles to faster economic growth and job creation. We need to act against those public representatives and officials who are delaying vital reforms that we need to build a thriving economy.
Or what the Commission will be recommending, and what has been the debate, is that government must continue to utilize the fiscal policy to intensify the fight against poverty, inequality, and also hunger. So those are some of the issues, and utilize it as a tool to spend money in areas where it can grow the economy.
The country has witnessed record load shedding. Unemployment rate is still high at 32.9%. The repo rate is now 7%. While headline inflation sits at 7.4%, which is higher than the Reserve Bank's target of between 3 to 6%. What implications will Ramaphosa's re-election have on the economy?
The first I'd mentioned is to continue doing so quite vigorously, to ensure that the resources that are generated from taxes are appropriately spent and don't get siphoned into connected politicians' pockets. is to implement massive infrastructural investment programs that have already been announced but are not actually being executed. There is a massive opportunity for South Africa to turn around its economic fortunes by embarking upon these programs. The magnitude of these programs is huge and could make a tremendous difference, not only to potential service delivery, but immediately in terms of job creation and economic growth. And this could if it succeeded, end up in a virtuous circle of higher economic growth and more investment generally.
I will imagine that there will be some moments of reflection in terms of how do we improve from the successes that we've seen, but more importantly, how do we continue to get the whole country to rally behind these reforms that the president has initiated and has undertaken.
Hopefully, those reforms will not be stalled by the president's Phala farm theft scandal, which still hovers over him, beyond the ANC's conference, which didn't make room for it to be addressed for now. The rand rallied by about 2% when the announcement of Ramaphosa's re-election was confirmed, and some say this is a clear sign that this is what the economy needed. The country goes to 2023 at the back of a challenging 2022, but there is hope amongst others that the upcoming year will bring much-needed economic relief. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Brian Pugeni, Channels Television News.
Over in Ethiopia's northern Tigray region, a ceasefire deal there has raised cautious hope among millions of people impacted by the bloody two-year conflict. But the long months of conflict have caused immense harm. Many civilians are also reflecting on the terrible losses they suffered and look to promised aid to rebuild their lives after a war that has killed thousands, displaced millions and left hundreds of thousands facing famine. Footage from International Committee of the Red Cross, ICRC, shows damaged hospitals while water, electricity and medicines are in short supply.
The health needs are certainly one of our priorities. The food, we've heard not only among the host community, but also the IDPs. We will be also supporting these populations with the food that we will be distributing in the next few weeks.
The Congolese city of Goma faces food insecurity as renewed fighting by the M23 rebel group has forced thousands to flee their homes, causing major disruption in the farming sector, as well as cutting supply routes. Take a look.
Sitting in the dirt, farmer Valerie Kahindo picks spoiled kernels from a sack of maize. The only job she can find in the eastern Congolese city of Goma after rebel fighters seized her fields and forced her to flee without her family. The mother of 8 is among over 250,000 people displaced in the latest offensive by the M23 rebel group.
Right now, I have nothing to do in the village. The M23 set up camp in my field. It is in my cornfield that they are based. They destroyed my field. They harvested and took all the harvest, so I have nothing now. And this is where I used to supply my maize. So I come to spend my time here. I hope God and the President of the Republic gets the road opened again and that the rebels leave my field. I will go back to cultivating corn immediately to continue supplying this factory.
She says her children, grandchildren, parents and siblings are stuck in rebel-occupied parts of Rushuru territory to the north of Goma, a key trading hub of almost 1 million people on the border with Rwanda.
My whole family is held hostage. They are not allowed to work at night, not even go to the fields. Our cultures have been sabotaged. It is by grace that we live. There is not even a way anyone can help them. My children, my parents, and my brothers and sisters suffer a lot from it. They called me day and night asking me for help. but I have no way that I can send them even 5 kilograms of flour. There is not even a road to deliver it. It is a misery that people live in Rutshuru.
According to the Regional Business Association, since fighting surged in the province again in October, prices for everyday essentials such as maize, beans and charcoal have almost doubled because the violence has made roads impassable and forced farming cooperatives to close in Rutshuru, which is the breadbasket of the province.
On that note, we wrap up Network Africa. Thank you for watching. I'm Millicent Walker.